My parents always put my sister first, but when they found out I secretly had $12 million, they demanded I give it all to her. I'm using a throwaway account for obvious reasons, and some details have been changed to protect privacy. So, I'm Sarah, a 38-year-old female, and I need to get this off my chest. You know those family dynamics where one kid can do no wrong while the other one might as well be invisible? Yeah, welcome to my life. Everything was actually pretty normal until I was 8. I was an only child, and while my parents weren't exactly the warm and fuzzy type, they were present, I guess. Mom would help with homework. Dad would take me fishing at Lake St. Clair sometimes. We weren't the Brady Bunch, but we were okay. Then came the night that changed everything. I remember it like it was yesterday. My Aunt Kelly showing up at 2 in the morning, telling me to pack a bag because Mom was in the hospital. My sister Rachel was coming, but something was wrong. She wasn't supposed to arrive for another 2 months. The next few weeks were a blur of hospital visits and whispered conversations. Rachel was tiny, like really tiny. She looked like one of those baby dolls I had, except with all these tubes and wires. I wasn't allowed to touch her or even get too close. That was the first time I felt it, the invisible wall going up between me and the rest of my family. When they finally brought Rachel home, our house transformed into this sterile bubble. Mom became obsessed with germs. I'm talking industrial-strength disinfectant everywhere, hand sanitizer stations in every room, constant cleaning. The sharp smell of bleach still gives me anxiety to this day. But here's the part that really messed me up. Every time I showed even the slightest sign of being sick, I was shipped off to either Grandma Marie's or Aunt Kelly's place. And I mean every time. Sneeze once? Pack your bags. Slight cough? Off to Grandma's you go. At first, I actually thought it was fun. Grandma Marie would bake cookies, and Aunt Kelly had this cool collection of Nancy Drew books I was working my way through. But kids aren't stupid. After a while you start to realize what's really going on. You're not being sent away for adventures. You're being treated like a threat, like your very existence might harm your precious sister. I tried everything to get their attention in healthier ways. Seriously, everything. Got straight A's? Mom would barely look up from Rachel's latest doctor's appointment schedule. Won first place in the science fair with a project on renewable energy. Dad just asked if I could keep the display board in the garage because Rachel was sensitive to cardboard dust. Is that even a thing? The real kicker came when I was 12. I'd been practicing for months for the school talent show, teaching myself to play Bridge Over Troubled Water on the piano. Yeah, kind of on the nose, I know. The night of the show, Rachel had a fever of 99.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Guess who didn't have anyone in the audience? Meanwhile, 2 weeks later, the whole family, including both sets of grandparents, showed up for Rachel's 15-minute flute recital, where she basically murdered hot cross buns. Rachel figured out pretty quickly how to work the system. By age 7, she had completely outgrown any actual health issues, but that didn't stop the show. Headache? Must stay home from school. Feeling tired? Someone else, guess who, needs to do her chores. Stressed about a test? Mom would literally call the school to get the deadline extended. I started spending more and more time in my room, burying myself in books about art history and antiques. Funny how life works out sometimes. My room became my sanctuary, mostly because Rachel claimed she was allergic to my lavender air freshener, so it was the one place she wouldn't invade. You know what's really messed up? Part of me was actually grateful when she'd fake being sick. At least then, I'd get sent to Grandma Marie's, where someone would actually ask me about my day or care about what I was interested in. Grandma was the one who first got me interested in vintage jewelry. She had this amazing collection of costume pieces she'd let me organize and catalog. I should have seen that as foreshadowing, I guess. The worst part wasn't even the obvious favoritism, it was the way they rewrote history to justify it. Rachel just needs more attention because she had such a rough start. Sarah's always been so independent. Sarah understands that her sister has special needs. No, I didn't understand. I was a kid who couldn't figure out why having a healthy immune system made me less worthy of love. Looking back now, I can see how those years shaped me. The constant message that I was somehow dangerous or inconvenient to have around, that doesn't just disappear, but hey, at least it taught me to be self-reliant. When nobody's checking your homework or caring about your achievements, you learn to be your own cheerleader pretty quickly. High school? Most people either loved it or hated it. Me? I saw it as my ticket out. While Rachel was building her empire of drama in middle school, I was laying the groundwork for my escape. And let me tell you, nothing motivates you to succeed like knowing nobody's going to do it for you. Remember how I mentioned spending time organizing Grandma Marie's jewelry collection? Well, that actually taught me something important, the value of systematic organization and attention to detail. I applied that same mindset to everything in high school. My desk at home looked like something out of an organization magazine, color-coded notebooks, perfectly arranged study schedules. Everything had its place. Rachel used to make fun of me for it, calling me Rain Man. Real nice, sis. But here's the thing about being invisible. Nobody's watching you fail or succeed, so you might as well do whatever the hell you want. I joined every club that wouldn't conflict with my part-time job at Carson's Diner. Shout out to Carol, the owner, who actually remembered my birthday when my own parents forgot. Debate team? Check. National Honor Society president? Check. School newspaper editor-in-chief? Check. The debate team was where I really found my groove. There's something incredibly satisfying about destroying someone's argument while maintaining perfect composure. Plus, it taught me how to negotiate, a skill that would come in handy later, though I didn't know it at the time. Won states twice, by the way. My parents missed both competitions because Rachel had important soccer games. She was on the C team. Didn't even play. Junior year was when things got really interesting. I took the SATs and got a perfect score. Not like, oh, pretty good perfect, I mean perfect, 1600. You know how many people get that? Less than 1%. I remember staring at the results screen for like 20 minutes straight, thinking it had to be a mistake. Rushed home to tell my parents. Stupid, I know. Mom was in the kitchen helping Rachel with her English homework. The conversation went something like this. Me, Mom, look. I got a perfect SAT score. Mom, that's nice, honey, but can you keep it down? Rachel's trying to concentrate. She has a big test tomorrow. Rachel, yeah, some of us actually have to study, Miss Perfect. Mom, Rachel, sweetie, don't stress. You're just a different kind of learner. I still have the printout of those SAT scores somewhere, never even got pinned to the fridge. But Rachel's CP Los in English? That baby got prime refrigerator real estate, complete with a "we're so proud of you" magnet. The college application process was interesting. I applied to 15 schools without telling anyone, wrote all my own essays, got my own recommendations, and handled all the financial aid paperwork myself. My guidance counselor, Mr. Chen, was the real MVP. He stayed late after school to help me navigate the FAFSA since my parents couldn't be bothered. Then the acceptances started rolling in. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, University of Michigan, and every single one with a scholarship offer. I kept them all in a locked box under my bed because I knew what would happen if Rachel found them. Suddenly, they'd become all about her somehow. But if Sarah goes to Harvard, I'll be all alone. Or some BS like that. The day I got my full ride offer from the University of Michigan was the same day Rachel made JV cheerleading. Guess which one got celebrated with a family dinner? Hint, I ate microwave mac and cheese in my room while they went to Olive Garden. But you know what? That scholarship was my golden ticket, full tuition, room and board, even a stipend for books. I could finally get out of that house where I was either invisible or an inconvenience. The day I got that acceptance package, I went to my favorite spot in the local library, 4th floor window seat overlooking the park, and cried for an hour straight. Not sad tears, relief tears. When I announced at dinner that I was going to the University of Michigan, my parents' responses were "Peek them, Dad, Michigan? But that's so far. What if Rachel needs you? Mom, I hope you're not expecting us to help with expenses. Rachel's cheerleading competitions are very costly. Rachel, oh my God, finally. Can I have your room? I need a space for my TikTok videos. The summer before college, I worked double shifts at Carson's to save up money. Carol, bless her heart, would slip me extra tips and always made sure I got to take home leftover pie at the end of my shifts. She also taught me something invaluable: how to spot genuine people in a world full of fakes. Baby, she'd say, in diners and in life, the ones making the most noise usually have the least to say. Move-in day at the University of Michigan? My parents couldn't come because, surprise, Rachel had a cheer competition. Aunt Kelly drove me instead. helped me set up my dorm room, and slipped me an envelope with $100 in it. "Your Grandma Marie wanted you to have this," she said. "She's so proud of you." I found out later that Grandma had been saving up that money for months from her Social Security checks. That first night in my dorm room, I made a promise to myself. I was going to build a life so good that being overlooked would be impossible, not for revenge, not to prove anything to my family, but for that 8-year-old girl who used to get shipped off to Grandma's house for sneezing. College flew by in a blur of all-nighters, instant ramen, and blessed freedom. I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Michigan. Not that my parents noticed. They were too busy helping Rachel transfer to her third college in 2 years. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. I landed this entry-level position at Everett and Phillips Auction House in Detroit. I'm not going to use the real name for obvious reasons, but if you're in the business, you probably know which one I'm talking about. Real high-end place, lots of old money clients, that type of deal. I started in their estate sales division, basically cataloging rich people's stuff after they died. Not exactly glamorous, but hey, it paid the bills. My first few months were pretty standard, logging endless china sets, cataloging vintage furniture, that kind of thing. Then came the Kingston estate. Mrs. Kingston was this elderly widow who'd passed away with no kids, leaving behind what everyone thought was just a massive collection of costume jewelry, like rooms full of the stuff. Here's where those hours at Grandma Marie's came in handy. I'm sorting through this mountain of jewelry, and something catches my eye. It's this Art Deco brooch. Nothing super flashy, but something about it just felt different. The weight was wrong for costume jewelry, and the clasping mechanism was way too sophisticated for a knockoff. I must have spent my entire lunch break that day researching vintage jewelry markers and signatures. I ended up staying late at the office, using the company's subscription to some antique jewelry databases. The more I looked, the more convinced I became. This wasn't costume jewelry, this was the real deal. Problem was, I was just the new girl. Nobody was going to take me seriously if I started claiming we had a potential treasure on our hands. So I did what debate team taught me, prepared my case methodically. I spent 2 weeks of lunch breaks and evenings studying everything I could about Art Deco jewelry authentication. I even took some of my sad excuse for savings and paid for an online gemology course. Finally, I worked up the courage to go to my supervisor, Mr. Harrison. I brought this whole presentation with comparative photos, historical documentation, the works. The conversation went something like this. "Me, sir, I think we might have something significant in the Kingston collection." Harrison, barely looking up from his phone, "Sarah, we've already cataloged those as costume pieces." "Me, I know, but look at these makers' marks. They match perfectly with Cartier's 1925 signatures, and the stone setting technique." Harrison, finally paying attention. "Where did you learn all this?" "Me, I did some research." Long story short, that costume brooch sold for $47,000 at auction. Turns out, it was part of a limited collection made for some European duchess in the 1920s. But here's the real kicker. After that, Harrison started giving me more pieces to authenticate. Suddenly, my useless hobby of organizing old jewelry had actual value. I threw myself into learning everything I could about vintage jewelry, took every online course I could afford, spent weekends at estate sales studying pieces, and even started a little notebook documenting different authentication techniques. My apartment looked like a jewelry scholar's fever dream, walls covered in printouts of vintage hallmarks and certification guides. The auction house started seeing results. I was finding valuable pieces that others had missed, building relationships with collectors, learning the market. My commission checks got bigger. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was actually saving money. Of course, my family remained spectacularly uninterested. At Sunday dinners, which I still attended like an idiot, the conversation went something like this. "Mom, Sarah's still at that antique shop, right?" "Me, auction house, Mom, and yes. Actually, I just authenticated a rare Tiffany piece." Rachel, interrupting, "OMG, speaking of jewelry, you guys have to see this charm bracelet I bought at the mall." But I didn't care anymore. For once in my life, I had found something that was entirely mine, something I was genuinely good at, something that had nothing to do with being Rachel's sister or the family disappointment. Then came the Rothschild collection. This was about 2 years into my time at the auction house. A huge estate, old money family, lots of hype in the industry. I was part of the team cataloging their jewelry collection, and that's when I spotted it. A seemingly unremarkable Art Nouveau piece that everyone else had overlooked. I spent 3 days researching it, barely slept, and finally figured out it was a piece from a famous French jeweler's private collection, thought to be lost during World War II. When it sold at auction for $238,000, Harrison called me into his office. I thought I was getting a promotion. Instead, he said something that changed everything. "Sarah, you're wasting your talent here. You should be running your own authentication business." At first I laughed it off. Me start a business? With what money? But the idea took root. I started doing small freelance authentication jobs on the side. Word got around that I had a good eye. Private collectors began reaching out directly. One night, I was sitting in my tiny apartment, surrounded by jewelry guides and authentication tools I'd slowly been collecting, when I realized something. I could actually do this. I could build something of my own. So, I did what any rational person would do. Took out a massive loan against my car, emptied my savings account, and rented a tiny office space in a not-so-great part of town. Everyone thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. It was a converted storage room above a Chinese restaurant, no bigger than a college dorm room. The rent was cheap because it smelled like Kung Pao chicken 24/7, and the Wi-Fi only worked if you sat in the corner by the window, but it was mine. Those first few months were interesting, and by interesting I mean terrifying. I'd wake up at 4 in the morning in cold sweats, calculating how many months until my savings ran out. The loan payments felt like a noose around my neck. My office furniture consisted of a card table I got from Goodwill, and a chair I literally found on the curb. Cleaned it thoroughly, don't worry. But here's the thing about the high-end jewelry world, it's all about reputation and connections. My time at the auction house had given me both. I started small, doing authentication work for local antique dealers. My rates were lower than the big firms, but my attention to detail was becoming known. Word spread. The turning point came 6 months in. A dealer I'd worked with at the auction house called about a collection of Victorian-era brooches. The owner wanted authentication before selling. It turned out to be a huge collection, like 3 generations of family pieces huge. I worked on it for 2 weeks straight, barely sleeping, documenting everything. I found 2 incredibly rare pieces that had been misidentified as later reproductions. The owner was so impressed with my detailed report that she not only paid my fee, but also gave me a 10% commission when the pieces sold. That commission? $86,000, more money than I'd made in the previous 2 years combined. Suddenly, my phone started ringing more, a lot more. Private collectors who'd heard about my eye for overlooked pieces, estate lawyers wanting consultation on inheritance pieces. Even my old auction house started sending me authentication work. Pretty sure Harrison was secretly helping spread the word. Thanks, boss. Year 2, I hired my first employee, Jenny, a recent gemology graduate who reminded me way too much of myself at that age, smart as hell but overlooked because she was quiet. She's now my head of authentication, and literally worth her weight in gold. The business grew faster than I could have imagined. We moved to a real office downtown. Goodbye, Kung Pao chicken smell. Built a team of specialists, developed a reputation for finding lost pieces. You'd be amazed how many important historical jewelry pieces are sitting in people's attics, misidentified as costume jewelry. But success brought its own challenges. The bigger we got, the harder it became to keep it quiet from my family. They still thought I worked at some antique shop. Rachel would make these condescending comments at family dinners. "Sarah, I have some old jewelry I was going to donate to Goodwill. Maybe your little shop would want it?" Me, who had just authenticated a $1.2 million Fabergé piece that morning. "Sure, I'll take a look." Mom still introduced me to people as my other daughter. She works with old jewelry or something. While I was being quoted in Forbes under my company name, thankfully, and had just opened our 3rd office location. The weird part? Keeping it secret became almost fun, like this private joke with myself. I'd sit there at Sunday dinner in my Target clearance outfit, actually Chanel, while Rachel bragged about her entry-level marketing job, knowing I just closed a deal worth more than her annual salary. I even started playing little games with myself, like wearing real Harry Winston pieces to family events, waiting to see if anyone would notice, They never did. Rachel once spent 20 minutes showing off her fancy $200 Michael Kors watch while I was wearing a vintage Patek Philippe worth more than her car. But the real challenge was managing growth. By year 5, we had offices in Detroit, Chicago, and New York. I was spending more time on planes than in my own bed, built a reputation for discretion. Turns out, lots of wealthy people want their jewelry authenticated without the world knowing about it. The money was substantial, had to hire a team of financial advisors substantial, but I kept living relatively modestly, bought a nice but not flashy house in a good neighborhood, drove a high-end but not obvious car. The only place I really splurged was my home office, state-of-the-art authentication equipment, best security system money could buy, and a custom-built vault that would make Fort Knox jealous. The irony? They thought I was being frugal to afford helping them. Mom would say things like, "It's so sweet of Sarah to help out, she must be eating nothing but ramen to manage it," while I just authenticated a collection that netted me a commission bigger than their mortgage. You know what's weird about success? The more you have, the harder it becomes to explain to people who've always seen you as less. It's like trying to explain colors to someone who's only ever seen in black and white. They don't have the context for it. By this point, my company was doing incredibly well. We'd cornered the market on high-end jewelry authentication in the Midwest, and our reputation was solid gold, pun intended. But every Sunday, I'd still drive to my parents' house for dinner, playing the role of Sarah, the modest antique shop worker. The cognitive dissonance was getting ridiculous. I'd spend my mornings on conference calls with Dubai collectors, afternoons authenticating pieces worth millions, then show up at my parents' house in carefully selected normal clothes, to eat Mom's overcooked pot roast while Rachel dominated the conversation with stories about her latest marketing triumph, usually something like getting her boss coffee without spilling it. One Sunday stands out particularly clear in my memory. I had just finished a major deal, authenticated a lost Cartier piece that had been sitting in someone's safety deposit box for 40 years. The commission alone was 7 figures. I drove straight from that meeting to my parents' house, still riding the high of the successful authentication. "Mom, Sarah, honey, is everything okay? Your clothes are looking a bit worn." Me, wearing a $3,000 cashmere sweater I'd deliberately chosen because it looked understated. "Oh, trying to save money." Rachel, "Well, if you'd gotten a real job instead of playing with old jewelry." "Dad, Rachel, be nice. Not everyone can be as successful as you." I nearly choked on my pot roast, trying not to laugh. The monthly payments to my parents started around this time. I found out through Aunt Kelly that they were struggling with Rachel's student loans and some medical bills. Mom had mentioned offhand that they might have to sell the house. I couldn't let that happen. Despite everything, it was still the house I grew up in. I set up an anonymous monthly transfer of $5,000 to their account. When they asked, I claimed I was contributing $1,000 of it by living on rice and beans. They assumed the rest came from Aunt Kelly or other relatives. Rachel, of course, took credit for inspiring family members to help. The money helped, but it also changed things in ways I hadn't expected. My parents started treating me with this weird mix of pity and patronizing pride, like I was some kind of noble poverty case sacrificing everything to help family. Meanwhile, Rachel's spending got more outrageous. She'd show up to dinner with new designer bags, claiming they were outlet finds. They weren't. I can spot a real Gucci at 20 paces. She started taking expensive vacations, posting all over Instagram about her blessed life. Pretty sure she was using my support money for her shopping sprees, but I bit my tongue. The irony was too perfect. Then came the college fund drama. Rachel announced she wanted to go back to school for her MBA, another private university, of course. Nothing but the best for the golden child. Mom called me in tears about how they couldn't afford it. Maybe Rachel could look at state schools. They have good programs too. Mom, oh honey, you don't understand. Your sister needs to maintain certain standards. But speaking of helping, could you maybe increase your monthly contribution? Just for a few years? I bumped it up to $7,000 monthly. It didn't even dent my accounts, but watching them praise Rachel for taking initiative with her education while assuming I was living on ramen to help out, that stung a bit. The real kicker? I was teaching a guest seminar at the same business school Rachel wanted to attend. Not that my family knew that. The dean personally asked me to lecture about luxury goods authentication and business growth. I had to make up an excuse about why I couldn't make it to Sunday dinner that week. My own success started feeling like this separate life, like I was some kind of corporate superhero with a secret identity. By day, I was running a multi-million-dollar authentication empire. By night, well, Sunday evenings, I was just Sarah, the disappointing daughter who worked at some antique shop. The weight of the lie was getting heavier, though. Every time Rachel made a condescending comment about my career, every time Mom apologized to her friends about my modest lifestyle, every time Dad suggested I look for a real job, it got harder to stay quiet. Looking back, I think I always knew it would end dramatically. I just didn't expect it to implode quite so spectacularly at Thanksgiving. It started 2 weeks before the holiday. Mom called, crying about her back pain. She'd been diagnosed with a herniated disc, and the thought of cooking Thanksgiving dinner for 20 people was overwhelming her. Now, I'd love to tell you I offered to help purely out of kindness, but honestly, I was tired of pretending her dry turkey was edible. Me, why don't I handle the food this year? I can have it catered. Mom, oh honey, we can't afford a caterer. Me, don't worry about the cost, I've been saving up. Mom, sounding concerned. You're not taking out a loan, are you? I arranged everything through this high-end catering company I use for my business events. They do amazing work, the kind of food that makes you wonder why you ever bothered cooking yourself. It cost more than what my parents thought I made in 2 months. But, whatever. Thanksgiving morning arrived, and I was actually feeling pretty good. I had my laptop with me because I needed to monitor an important online auction in Hong Kong. This incredible Art Nouveau necklace was up for sale, and I had a client very interested in authentication if they won the bid. The food arrived exactly on time, everything perfectly prepared. Rachel, of course, had to comment, "Store-bought stuffing, really, Sarah? Mom's is so much better." This from the girl who once set off the smoke alarm trying to make toast. Mom kept apologizing to everyone about not cooking herself, but you could tell people were actually enjoying the food. Even Rachel shut up once she tasted the maple-glazed Brussels sprouts, which, by the way, cost more per plate than her weekly grocery budget. I stepped away between dinner and dessert to check my laptop. The auction was getting interesting, and I needed to be ready if my client won. I set up in my old bedroom, which Mom had kept exactly the same since high school. Meanwhile, Rachel's room had been renovated 3 times. That's when everything went sideways. I'd left my authentication software running, multiple tabs open showing various accounts and ongoing deals. Rachel barged in without knocking, some things never change, to borrow my phone charger. She spotted my laptop screen and decided this was her moment to finally expose how pathetic her big sister really was. Rachel, smirking, "Let's show everyone what Sarah's really been up to." Before I could stop her, she grabbed my laptop and marched into the dining room. Picture this, 20 people, including aunts, uncles, cousins, and my parents, all stuffed with gourmet turkey and half drunk on expensive wine, which they thought was from Trader Joe's. "Rachel, time to see what kind of important work Sarah's doing on Thanksgiving." She turned the laptop around triumphantly, clearly expecting to embarrass me with whatever small-time antique deals she thought I was working on. The room went dead silent, like you could hear the expensive clock I'd bought Mom for Christmas, which she thought was a replica, ticking. My screen showed, current account balance, $12.4 million, pending authentication contract, $485,000. Recent transaction, $1.2 million, that Hong Kong auction company quarterly profit report, $4.2 million. Rachel's face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. The last one settled somewhere between shock and nausea. She actually swayed a bit on her feet. Rachel barely whispering, This can't be right. Mom, Rachel, honey, what is it? Rachel, voice cracking, she's rich. Sarah's rich. The silence got even deeper, if that was possible. Then Mom started laughing, like actually laughing. Mom, don't be silly. Sarah works at that little antique shop. I stood up slowly, straightening my simple cashmere sweater that cost more than their monthly mortgage. Me, actually, Mom. I own one of the largest jewelry authentication companies in the country. Have for years. Those antique shop comments. I authenticate pieces worth millions. That little business you never asked about? It has offices in 3 cities. Dad choked on his wine. Aunt Kelly dropped her fork. Uncle Mike started coughing uncontrollably. Then Mom's laughter turned into something else. Her face went red, then purple. She stood up so fast her chair fell over. Mom screaming, "You have millions and you let us struggle? Me struggle? I send you $7,000 every month. Mom, while sitting on millions? Your sister has student loans." And there it was. Not congratulations, not wow, we're so proud. Just instant anger that I hadn't given them more money. Rachel started crying. Shocking, I know. Saying something about how she deserved to know. How I'd betrayed the family. Dad joined in. "How could you be so selfish? We're your parents, we raised you." That's when I lost it. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, treated like the family disappointment, it all came pouring out. Me? Raised me? You shipped me off to grandma's every time I sneezed. You missed every achievement, every award, every milestone, because Rachel might feel left out. You never saved a penny for my college but took out loans for her private school. And now you're mad that I built something for myself. The next 10 minutes were chaos. Mom screaming about family obligations, Dad ranting about ungrateful children, Rachel alternating between sobbing and demanding to know exactly how much money I had. Meanwhile, the expensive catering staff were trying to serve dessert, looking extremely uncomfortable. I grabbed my laptop, picked up my Hermes bag, which Mom had earlier complimented as a nice replica, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear Mom already planning how to spend my money. Something about Rachel's MBA and a new car. As I drove home in my sensible car, actually a limited edition BMW, my phone started blowing up with messages. The family group chat exploded. Rachel started posting on Facebook about hidden family wealth and selfish siblings. But you know what the craziest part was? I felt relieved, like I could finally breathe properly for the first time in years. The days following that Thanksgiving were like watching a hurricane hit in slow motion, except the hurricane was my family, and the debris was my sanity. Let's start with the text messages. Within an hour of leaving dinner, my phone had 47 missed calls and over 200 messages. Mom went through this fascinating progression. 7:42 p.m. How dare you walk out on family? 8:15 p.m. We need to talk about this like adults. 9:03 p.m. Your sister deserves a share of your success. 10:30 p.m. I've already called a realtor about houses in better neighborhoods. 11:45 p.m. Why aren't you answering? This is your mother. Rachel, meanwhile, had gone full social media warrior, posted this epic rant on Facebook about how her millionaire sister had been hoarding wealth while watching her beloved family struggle. The comment section was wild. Distant relatives and old high school classmates suddenly had very strong opinions about my moral character. But here's the part that really got me. Rachel actually posted all those years of me trying to help her career, giving her advice about moving up from that little antique shop, and she was secretly wealthy. The betrayal hurt so much. I nearly threw my phone across the room. The only career advice she'd ever given me was suggesting I try selling jewelry on Etsy. Then came the flying monkeys. If you're not familiar with the term, it's when toxic family members send other people to guilt trip you. Aunt Susan, who I see maybe once every 3 years, called to tell me about how family is everything. Uncle Bob, who I'm pretty sure still thinks I'm 12, emailed a long lecture about the importance of sharing wealth. Even my third cousin's wife's sister somehow got my number to share her thoughts on family duty. But the real fun started when they showed up at my office Monday morning. I walked in to find Mom, Dad, and Rachel sitting in our reception area. They told Jenny, my receptionist, they had an appointment for authentication services. Rachel was clutching her Michael Kors bag like it might actually be worth something. The conversation went about as well as you'd expect. "Mom, we've discussed it as a family." Me? A family discussion without the family member you're discussing? Mom? Ignoring me. "And we think it's only fair that you set up trust funds for everyone. Rachel needs at least $2 million to start her new life properly." Dad? "And your mother and I would like to retire. We're thinking a beach house in Florida." Me? "Did you miss the part where I've been sending you $7,000 monthly?" Rachel, "That's nothing compared to what you have. You owe us." Me? "I owe you? For what exactly?" The years of being ignored, the missed graduations, the constant comparisons. Mom, "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. We gave you everything." Me? "No, I gave myself everything. And you know what? I'm done." Right there in my own office lobby, I pulled out my phone and canceled the monthly transfers to their account. Mom actually gasped, like I'd slapped her. Rachel started doing her fake crying thing but stopped real quick when she realized it wasn't working. That's when it got ugly. They refused to leave. I had to call security. Watching my 60-year-old mother being escorted out while screaming about ungrateful children was surreal. Jenny asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no, but had their names added to the building's do not admit list. The harassment continued for weeks. New phone numbers, fake email accounts, even trying to reach me through my company's customer service. I finally had to send a formal legal notice threatening harassment charges. That's when Mom played her final card. She called Grandma Marie. But here's the thing about Grandma Marie. She's smarter than all of them combined. Her response? Good for Sarah. About time someone in this family succeeded on their own terms. Mom didn't speak to her for 2 months after that. It's been 6 months since Thanksgiving. I moved to a new house with better security, changed all my numbers. The company's doing better than ever. Turns out, my family drama actually brought in some high-profile clients who appreciated my discretion with the whole situation. Rachel's still posting passive-aggressive updates about toxic wealth and family betrayal. Last I heard, she's telling everyone she's starting her own jewelry authentication business. Good luck with that. Mom and Dad finally stopped trying to contact me when I had my lawyer send them a formal letter detailing exactly how harassment charges would affect their lives. They're now telling everyone they never wanted my money anyway, and how they're praying for my soul. But you know what? For the first time in my life, I feel free. No more Sunday dinners filled with subtle jabs, no more downplaying my success, no more funding the Rachel show. My therapist says I'm finally setting healthy boundaries. I say I'm finally living authentically. So, that's my story, Reddit. Thanks for letting me share it. Special shout out to the catering company. They sent me a Christmas card saying that Thanksgiving dinner was the highlight of their year.